Your data, like your DNA, is an individual ledger. So DNA obviously is individual. Everybody has their own unique DNA. That's why people do DNA sequencing to find out what they might be prone to potentially, and that's a growing field. So the same thing is happening more and more in the future with data. It wasn't until a few years ago that people really realized the financial both risks and value of data. In the 2016 election, also with Cambridge Analytica, Facebook ran into huge problems and scandals because of the way the data was not only used but abused. And there's a famous saying that if a product is free, that you are the product. So basically, we trade our data. Now for like free products, but in the future, that's not going to be good enough. I've had a few recent podcasts because one, we want to make sure that our data is not misused, and two, we want to share on the profits. We are basically, stakeholders and in a sense shareholders of Facebook, because Facebook cannot exist without our data. First of all, they would have no monetization without our data, and second of all, they would have no content without our data, because Facebook is nothing except for all the data that people put on there, their photos and their posts and things of that nature, their activity in groups and everything else. So in the future, your data, like your DNA, will be an individual ledger. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm talking specifically about the blockchain, but it also applies more broadly. So not only will we be monetized for our data in the future, and I have another recent podcast that talks about some mechanisms that will take, but we'll have an individual, record composite of it as well, because right now, like, data is more ephemeral and it's more fragmented. So, Facebook has some of our data, the Department of Motor Vehicles has some of our data, different websites, different apps. Our data is fragmented all over the place, but through different kind of technologies, including blockchain and also, the broadband capabilities like 5G, we'll be increasingly able to, there'll be companies that will be increasingly able to consolidate our data and keep it for us, and then we'll dole it out. I'll give this data to Facebook if they pay me this, or I'll give this data to another company if they pay me that. So we'll be in charge of our data. So the blockchain, for example, will do like a permanent record of any kind of smart contract or any kind of historical. Like right now, the blockchain is used a lot for provenance, like who owns something, or it's also done for history, like supply chain, like what are all the steps that a certain raw material or product went through. So everything will be documented, like everything in our identity, all of our data will be documented, potentially if we want that, based upon these different record keeping and time stamping capabilities. The other thing is that there'll be a lot more documentation through such things as live streaming. There'll be like libraries of live streaming. Like right now, a lot of these things are ephemeral. Like, for example, on Snapchat and other platforms, you have some creativity, but it's not kept. Like on YouTube and Facebook, it's kept. But as we start becoming more in our live streaming capacities, basically there's the potential that our whole life can be documented, not only our actions, but also our thoughts. I've done recent podcasts also in terms of like how thinking is being captured in different ways. Facebook has a lot of research on this. So devices will be controlled by thoughts. Memories can actually be cataloged. They can identify like the different neural sequences of firing. So basically things are going to become much more individualized and individual controlled. And I talk about this in another podcast of why that's the case, because things have become much more democratized, like through these technologies. Now, it used to be that only Walter Cronkite gave the news, but now everyone's a blogger. Everyone has a YouTube channel. Everyone has, Facebook and Instagram. So the empowering capabilities, it used to be that just a few people were authors. Now with Kindle and Create Space, anybody could easily be an author. So these are becoming much more democratized, so it's easy to see how in the future your data, like your DNA, will be essentially an individual ledger.